Zakaria GPS, CNN Sunday morning 10 Eastern and Pacific.
Now, there's an interesting debate about whether the events in the Middle East are good for the United States, the West, good for peace and stability. But I think there can be little dispute about whom they are bad for, Al-Qaeda. In fact, the Arab Revolts of 2011 represent a total repudiation of Al-Qaeda's founding ideology. Think about it. For 20 years, Al-Qaeda has said that the regimes of the Arab world are nasty dictatorships and that the only way to overthrow them is to support Al-Qaeda and its terrorism. And then, in a few weeks, the people of the Arab world have overturned 2 despotic governments by means of non-violent demonstrations. And they have begun a process of reform and revolution that will alter the basic bargain between the ruler and ruled in the Middle East. Al-Qaeda also insisted that people follow its path to create a perfect Islamic state drawing from the 7th century and reject democracy and freedom as Western imports. Well, so far the demonstrations have been strikingly secular, largely devoted to calls against corruption and dictatorship, and affirm the importance of democracy and freedom for Arabs. Of course, there are some important Islamic movements within these societies, and they will surface and some of them will gain strength, but they too seem to want democracy. And in any event, they seem balanced by many non-Islamic groups. The basic point is that Al-Qaeda seems to have little appeal in the Muslim world and even in Arab countries where it originated. Polls affirm this, reporting suggests this, and the revolution confirms it. There really is no hankering in the Middle East for a return to the 7th century, only a desire for jobs, pluralism, freedom, good government. Now, Al-Qaeda has embraced violence precisely because it has no political strength or strategy. It cannot bring 1 million people into Tahrir Square in Cairo to demand the ouster of Mubarak. So it hopes to shock and awe people with spectacular acts of violence. But these too are harder and harder to pull off as the public turns against them and governments all over the world pursue them. Now, I've been making these points for years, but it is as if we are all much more comfortable being terrified of a phantom foe that is 7 feet tall. So just let's look one more time at the facts. Since 9/11, Al-Qaeda has been unable to launch a single attack in the United States. Small groups of people inspired by it have managed a few smaller attacks in some cities in Europe and the Middle East and Asia. But even these have been getting fewer and fewer and further between. Most terrorism is now the product of lone would-be suicide bombers rather than an organized political movement with a central figure or central organization. Political support for Al-Qaeda, Islamic terrorism, and suicide bombings has been dropping in every Muslim country in the world on which we have polling data. If the Arab world becomes more democratic, those numbers will continue to fall. In Iraq, for instance, support for political violence is tiny, lower than it is in the United States. So can we all take a deep breath, stop cowering in fear of the impending caliphate, and put the problem of Islamic terrorism in perspective? It's real, but it is not going to take over the world anytime soon.